Well, hello. Thank you for joining us today. My name is John Catchpole. I'm a legal director with Footansty. I'm based in our Truro office. For those of you who don't know us, Footansty is a top 75 UK law firm. We're really proud of our roots in the Southwest and the support we provide to all of our clients in Cornwall and the wider region. Thank you very much to Cornwall Chamber of Commerce team for inviting us to speak with you today, the first virtual Cornwall Business Fair. We're really grateful. We're going to use this opportunity to chat to you about mobility. So mobility is a subject which is important to everyone and particularly relevant to those of us living and working in Cornwall. We're really lucky at Footansty because we've got a team of specialists who focus on this particular area. And I'm joined by joined today by three members of our mobility team. We've got Sarah Sloman, our zero emission mobility manager. We've got a real estate partner, Richard Walford, and we've got managing associate and planning specialist, James Clark. So between us, we're all going to talk to you a bit about mobility. We're going to talk about why it's important and why we should be making the most of the opportunities. So I suppose the best place to start is for me to ask the question, mobility. What is it? What's it all about? And well, Sarah, would you be able to kick us off with some thoughts on that one?
Absolutely. And how long have you got? Mobility can be anything you need it to be. So it's about making sure that people can get to the places they need to go efficiently and cleanly. So we're talking about two things here. It's about clean air and also reducing the congestion. So it has to go right back to the start. So where are you living? Where is your best mobility option? Are you somebody who lives very rurally and commutes to an urban area, or are you somebody who has chosen to live in an urban area? The two are very different things. You need to think carefully about it as a whole, as a holistic option. It can be anything at all, from whether one day you want to cycle or hire an electric bike or be part of an EV car club. This isn't about saying, right, well, you need to dump your car. You can't have a car. This isn't about that. It's about making sure that people have the choice to choose the way they travel each day for each option and each distance. So mobility is applicable to absolutely everyone and everything, every business, everywhere. And I've been in transport now for 15 plus years, working for local authorities, really helping get to the nub of how do we design our towns and cities to make sure that things flow well for everybody who needs to use them. It's just a great place to be, and it really touches everyone's lives. So I'm quite passionate about it.
That sounds great, and that passion certainly shows through. Richard, anything to add on that? What are your thoughts about mobility?
Yeah, I mean, really following on from that, and in terms of how mobility enters our sort of working lives as sort of part of the Cornwall business community. I mean, it's a change, obviously, as Sarah mentioned, that's really taken place sort of at a societal, government and policy level, and it's part of the wider commitment to moving towards a net zero carbon economy. And because of that, there's a commitment, I think, both within government and society, that these changes have to take place. And change is a real motivator and driver for new business activity and opportunity. Cornwall Council is particularly well placed, and Cornwall is well placed as a county, because the council, it does have a history of supporting and encouraging the development of new sustainable and renewable energy technologies, and it's thrown its support behind the development of mobility, and in particular in relation to electric vehicle infrastructure and charging. And what we're seeing now is really how mobility and EV, with the 2040 phasing out of traditional diesel and petrol fuels, becoming an intrinsic part of how we move around. And therefore most projects which we're involved with, which involve infrastructure, housing, new employment or commercial space, are having to incorporate elements of electric vehicle charging and infrastructure and other mobility solutions. So, it is a change, it is happening, it's attracting a lot of investment and funding, and Cornwall is actually ahead of the curve compared with a lot of local authorities in other regions. So it's in a good place at the moment.
Oh, that's great, thanks. And James, I suppose from a planning perspective, this is a key issue for developers and other people looking to bring forward infrastructure and projects.
I think it's fair to say it's becoming a key issue. I mean, the planning system is one of the mechanisms by which this change will be delivered on the ground. So national planning policy has sort of set a backdrop about having, developers considering sustainable modes of transport, but left it quite vague as to sort of how that is to take shape. Cornwall Council, along with other authorities last year, declared a climate emergency, and we're now seeing policy consequences of that coming through. So the council is consulting on its climate change development plan document, and that contains more specific policies about how these things are or how developers can deliver mobility solutions on the ground, rather than it just being an afterthought that sometimes gets tagged on to the end of a development project in the planning process.
Do you think developers are being a bit more proactive now rather than just reactive?
I think the scene's being set for that to happen, and for those projects where mobility is really thought about from the outset, to probably have an easier ride through the planning system rather than ones where it hasn't really been thought about properly and then gets bogged down in that sort of, that the consultation phase of the planning application once it's been submitted to the authority. So I think there's a real opportunity for developers to actually improve their prospects and design something that not only chimes with policy requirements, but I think increasingly, because community engagement and consultation is becoming increasingly important, is something as well that I would think local communities will expect to see for development coming through in their area in order to sort of gain local support as well.
Yeah, great. So, Sarah, how is this playing out? Where have we been with mobility and EV, and where's it heading?
It's just, I've never seen anything like it. We're seeing people actually want this. So people are looking to buy houses and homes that have clean green energy as part of their living environment, because it's a very affordable way to live, sustainable and affordable. So with that comes hand in hand the opportunity to think about, well, I do still want to have a family car, so therefore I can charge it from my own home or from a community hub. And this is where this mobility hub concept comes in, because it's about you are living somewhere that has the opportunity to have a community heart, but also a sustainable development heart too. So you're near to a transit bus network, you're near to an opportunity to hire an electric bike to do that slightly medium term journey, but also you're going to a college or a school or a place of work that supports these modes of travel at the other end as well. So the developers are having to look at this as a whole overview and understand how people move around. So I'm talking demographics, but also traffic flows and actually environmental things and geography things, and is it a hilly area? And all of these factors come into play, but we haven't seen it been so entrenched before until we had the climate emergency. And actually in Bristol, where I'm based as the West of England Combined Authority there with 4 regional local authorities, and Bristol was the first to declare the climate emergency. And I was working at North Somerset Council, and we were required to really nail our colours to the mast. Exactly what are we going to do, and how much money do we need in order to achieve that plan, and who are the key stakeholders? And at the heart of all of that was community and business. So we had to engage with the businesses and hear what they need. And that's really what I'm seeing in Cornwall, which I'm really excited about. And I grew up rurally. I'm talking about a bus every couple of hours. And my parents are those sorts of people that go, well, if you can't walk or cycle it, you're not going. And so a car-based life from your childhood onwards will help you adapt and enable a car-free life. But I'm realistic. I understand that cars are part of people's lives, and my plea at the moment is that you think about the clean air rather than the consequence of the congestion, because traffic planners can work out the congestion elements later. But we want to make it easy. So a mobility hub concept is that you take your vehicle, hopefully with more than one person in post-COVID, to a point at which you can change your mode of travel. So it's like a park and ride, could be anything from a bus stop or, as I said, an interchange, so you can pick up a new mode of transport when you get there. So already you'll be thinking, well, hang on, that's so many different partnerships involved, and that's the key. A collaboration. So we need the energy, the clean energy, we need the infrastructure to support it, and we need that collaboration. That's why I think events like today are so important. I'm hoping later there'll be lots of questions about how we can help underpin that.
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, you mentioned earlier about money, and I suppose that's one of the barriers potentially, because a lot of people think it all sounds great, and it's we all want to do this, but it's going to be expensive. Is it? So apart from the finances, are there other barriers that we need to have a think about, or how we need to work together, as you say, to collaborate to resolve?
Yes, absolutely. And it's about The finances are, you're right, so a total cost of ownership model on a standard family vehicle plus an EV family vehicle can be quite comparable, if not better. So we already know this, the price is coming down, the price of manufacturing the vehicles, electric vehicles, is coming down, but that's useless unless there is a public charging infrastructure network to support it. You know, the A30, the A38, all the way through the heart of Cornwall is improving, but at the moment isn't attractive. You know, that if you want to be an electric vehicle driver and use that area, but we've seen some amazing projects come forward. We've been so proud to be working with Devon and the low carbon initiative there to make sure that there is a rollout of public charging. So one is the funding in the first place to fund the infrastructure. Two is definitely the partnerships and collaboration, having the terms and conditions and everything in place to make sure that that is a long-term relationship. I'm talking 15 to 20 years worth of infrastructure evolution. So procuring the correct equipment to make sure that it's modular and you can upgrade the system as you go through these years, and how your village, rural area, urban area changes as you go. So it's not ever about ticking a box and buying something that's going to help a community. It's not that at all. We want to see community energy, we want to see integrated transport, and we want to see collaboration amongst businesses. And that's the only way that we're going to meet our carbon reduction targets and the needs of the climate emergency.
Yeah, well, it sounds incredibly important. It certainly sounds like the way things are heading. It sounds important for a number of different reasons. Perhaps we can have some thoughts on why it might be important. And James, you're all over the policy on this. What are your thoughts on the policy and the political angle?
Well, I suppose, on the one hand, as Sarah says, hopefully people will want to do it rather than so it's almost a voluntary thing. But I think from a policy perspective in planning, I think there is going to be an element of having to do it as well. So I think that early engagement and starting to grapple with it is going to be important for everybody. So Cornwall has consulted on its climate change development plan document, so that consultation's finished, but it's going to be consulted again after the council's considered the comments it's received, and that does talk about how these how this hierarchy of different modes of transport will be integrated into a scheme. Looking at walking, then cycling, then public transport, and then car clubs, then private car ownership. So these things are going to, people will have to grapple with it, but as I say, hopefully the intention is that people that will be buying into developments, that will be buying houses, actually want to see this. So hopefully that there's an element of not just the kind of the stick, as it were, from authorities in terms of requiring developers to do it, but actually the incentive, because that's what people want to see from developments going forward, this more sustainable sort of joined up thinking on mobility and how it connects literally to their lives.
Yeah, that sounds well. It sounds really important. It sounds like it's happening nationally as well as in Cornwall. Sarah and Richard, I suppose there's the national implications or even international, but also the more local, the ones that are relevant to Cornwall. What are your thoughts on that?
Is it worth? Yeah, we've been doing quite a bit of work on a range of projects nationally, acting with local authorities, developers of new infrastructure, investors and funders, and traditional transport operators and corporates, as well as then reaching out into communities and new housing projects and development. And one of the earliest areas, which quite rightly has got a lot of attention, is this ability to create a national strategic network of mobility hubs at key locations across the motorway network and the travel network in terms of railway stations and ports and marinas. And what a lot of the work we've been doing is really ensuring on the legal side that the solutions that are adopted are flexible and scalable, and they're the right solutions for the long term. I think like all new technologies, a bit like with new mobile phone technology, when mobile phones first came out, there's a bit of a wariness in the market about not moving too quickly because the pace of innovation is so great. And that's really where we've been involved, helping clients to work out what are the best solutions, and legally and commercially which solutions are right and will cater for their needs, not just immediately, but over the medium to longer term.
It's so true. And I forgot to mention, as I work on the energy and infrastructure team at ANSTI, I'm a non-legal person there. So it's very much my job to help triage these situations and to speak to businesses, particularly at the moment when fleet conversion is going to be a problem for pretty much everyone. And if you're in a clean air zone and you currently have just invested in perhaps even a Euro 6 diesel, it's not going to be long before you need to think about not having that vehicle and thinking about how else you can move around the city. So I'm talking about somebody that employs 5 to 10 people, right through to those 5,000 plus people. And my message is the same to all of them, which is always identify, first of all, your low-hanging fruit, understand your patterns and your hours of work and the implications that that might have on the nearby planning policy coming forward. So you can never talk enough to your local council and understand what it is that they've got in the pipeline. And you also need to just collaborate. If some of your neighbours have done something that you admire, go and speak to them or be part of a local business network like this one, where you can understand your opportunities. I was down in Mousel last year, and I'm going to Padstow today. I really adore everything about Cornwall, and I'm really enthused by the progress I am seeing. There's very narrow streets is often an excuse for not utilising electric vehicles, but we've seen Citroen C0s, tiny little deliveries going around all the shops in Mousel, and it was great to see that happening. And that's just one tiny example. We've got the same problem here in Gloucestershire. There's every small village says, oh no, we can't have it. Then a couple of years later, it starts to trickle in. So get in early, take advantage of the grants that are available, and use this trajectory to get yourself to somewhere ahead of the curve and get our help with it.
And this is already happening in Cornwall. People are already talking about this, and there are strategies to put this in place. And things that come to mind would be Langgarth Garden Village, fantastic developments. And if you have a look on the website, they're talking about mobility hubs and making sure it's somewhere people want to live. And
I want to live there.
it does look great. And then there's the St Earth Hub, which, I mean, sounds, Richard, like the kind of things that you've been working on, pulling together those stakeholders and making sure that the legal mechanisms work for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I think the St Earth Hub's really interesting because it's about a transport interchange. So essentially, you've got the rail terminus there, but it's about how to then link that up with other travel options in terms of, you've got the whole sort of Carbis Bay, St Ives area, which is a real travel conundrum in terms of congestion and overcrowding. So providing a range of solutions, taxi, bus services with good real-time bus information, the ability to hire cars there, and also cycle and pedestrian solutions. It's really giving people a range of opportunities if they're coming into that part of Cornwall, and I think it has made an appreciable difference in terms of helping movement around Carbis Bay and making the experience of local people and also visitors much more attractive. I mean, one of the things I always perhaps think in terms of people who might be sat listening to the presentation like this is, it's a new change. It's, we're in tough times with COVID and potential uncertainty around Brexit. This is just another cost that my business is going to have to come to terms with, because we've got these policy directions coming down the line with a move to a net zero economy. But a lot of the work we're doing is actually about helping clients find and realize the opportunities through all this. So just to give an example, we've recently been working on a large city centre development scheme, which was a new housing project. And by providing a mobility hub as part of that housing development, we were able to reduce the dependency of the residents on second car ownership. And that enabled the developer to actually invest and develop more housing on that site, and to develop that housing in a more viable way. And also, by doing so, that created more housing for the community, better quality housing, because there was more money to fund the development. And we were also able to bring the local community with some different and alternative transport options, putting in cycling infrastructure, charging infrastructure for cycling, which can make a really big difference, particularly if you're making lots of local journeys, dropping off children to school, etc., or just popping in and out of the city centre. But the other point really to make is that in Cornwall, a lot of people don't necessarily live in town and city centres, but we're seeing mobility as an opportunity to replace some of the lost community centres that people have had in the past through the post office, the local village shop, or the pubs. Having a mobility or transport hub, we're seeing interest from developers and authorities about how we can make these locations a sort of community focal point, really. It could be where you can have your click and collect facilities located. It might be a third place for you to go and work remotely, or to work in some sort of serviced office location, as well as being able to perhaps go and purchase something from a mobile retailer or shop or mobile hairdresser. So we're seeing some really interesting and innovative ideas coming forward, and it's about and you know, some real, where it has been implemented, some really positive and genuine experiences of how it can be sort of additive to quality of life and help communities sort of come back together again.
I think it's a really interesting point, and also those kinds of things are, as Sarah was saying earlier, scalable. So in planning terms, that you know, you might have a hub that is sort of established in its infancy, but then future developments, particularly smaller developments, where you know they're not going to be necessarily be able to host a multitude of things on site, but through community infrastructure levy or Section 106 requirements from a planning perspective, developer contributions can then be allocated to those hubs to then, you know, sort of upscale them and introduce different and new technologies, new transport modes, or whatever it might be, into those things. So they hopefully not just a static concept, and that they continually evolve and respond to changes in technology and changes in demand.
Yeah, I was just thinking that actually, James, because these things, you know, as you say, as technology evolves, and people's habits, you know, there are social changes happening, which have been happening for years, but being accelerated by COVID, with, you know, more people working from home. I mean, actually, you know, people just won't necessarily commute into large towns anymore. So actually, those hubs and making the most of them and making them work for the people that use them is important. And those requirements will change over time. So these hubs, and you know, they will need to evolve, and they will need to be flexible to accommodate that. Yeah, that's really interesting.
And on the legal side of that, John, you know, we've seen it with Cornwall. Now, I know there are discussions and thought around this going on within Cornwall, but also some of the other authorities we're looking at. They're really keen to ensure that the mobility solutions that are brought forward, they're sustainable in terms of involving local business and the local community. So we're currently working on a project involving the rollout of mobility hubs across a local authority area, but it's been done in a very careful way, because whilst you might end up with a very efficient, holistic mobility solution, if you simply went to some large multinational corporation, you wouldn't necessarily be engaging, providing opportunity for local people and local business. So what we're trying to do, and we're ensuring that written through the legal framework for setting up that mobility hub network is a means and a commitment to ensuring that local businesses can participate, and indeed will participate, by providing different parts of the solution, be it, you know, car clubs, local vehicle hire clubs who could participate and use some of these spaces, or indeed providing the infrastructure for some of the electric vehicle charging.
Yeah, well, that's music to the ears of the Cornwall Chamber of Commerce, and you know, all the local businesses, Cornish businesses watching this, because the local supply chain is really important. And so I suppose for businesses, you know, people watching this who run businesses who want to get involved, what do they need to think about? You know, what's the best way of getting involved? I suppose it depends on what their business is and how they approach it. Who would be the best person for them to speak to, or best sources of information?
Well, I think we need to keep this communication channel open. That's why we were so grateful to be involved today, just to offer that opportunity. I would say social networks can be really powerful. If you wanted to start a local group to open the discussion, I know here in rural Gloucestershire, we've done exactly that. And we are having a lot of house building because we're so close to Bristol. And as a result, we've been able to work with the developer and leverage some opportunities there with the 4 local authorities. And I volunteer for a Greenway group. So as a result of embracing the new communities and housing, we have managed to secure some funding for a feasibility study, for example, for a off-road cycle route, which will connect the towns and villages, which will reduce the traffic on the very narrow road network. And these are just the ways in which you can use your skills and your ability as a business owner to branch out commercially and think cleverly about how, as a region, you can improve the footfall in your shops. You can encourage people to come, to stay, and to dwell. And that's something we've seen a real advantage with electric vehicle charging, actually, is if you are able to offer electric vehicle charging at the right power ratio, means that your waiting time can be increased. And if you can offer an incentive, such as if you park in my car park and you pay to charge, you can also come to my cafe and have 20% off. there's ways of encouraging people to come to you for something that they're going to need to do anyway, but they then, because they know it's going to take 2-3 hours, tie that in with shopping, errands, seeing people. And this is why I love mobility so much, is because yes, it's about the vehicles and the moving around, but more than that, it's about getting together and making things work. And I really like the idea of the concept of having more of a community focus in a rural area where you wouldn't normally have bothered to dwell. But now that you have to go there to charge your car or pick up a parcel, you are going to see more people, and that will evolve naturally and organically with somebody wanting to start a new business with potentially a mobile coffee stand. The possibilities really are endless with mobility, because I say it connects everyone everywhere, and social media can be really good for that. If you create a positive group and you gather people organically to join that group, won't be long before you're all coming up with really excellent ideas. And then there's the difficult bit where you have to implement those ideas, and that's where being collaborative comes from. And I would just encourage people to follow us, follow me, follow everyone on this call on Twitter or LinkedIn, and we're always sharing really good ideas and connecting people. And not forgetting, the reason why we all thought that the Lancaster Garden Village was so great is because that started with ideas from Bremen in Germany and Norway, Belgium and the Netherlands, and looking across to other countries and seeing what they're doing. Just copy them. Take all of the best bits and let's make it better here in the UK. And Cornwall's got every opportunity to do that at the moment.
And I know the LEP is really committed in Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly to supporting this. Indeed, it's one of the big identified as one of the big opportunities for Cornwall through the new industrial strategy. So I'm sure the LEP would be very keen and happy to extend support and encouragement to business locally within the county.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for listening. Thank you very much to our panel, Sarah, Richard, and James, for sharing your thoughts on mobility. So hopefully you all now have a much better idea of what it's all about, why it's important, where the opportunities might be. And if you'd like to know more, please do feel free to get in touch. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.